Hi, I'm Glenn Reynolds, and I'm here at the National Tea Party Convention here in Nashville, Tennessee. And I'm joined by a guy who, well, basically, the internet like a colossus, a giant, a Zeus hurling thunderbolts, or something like that anyway. Andrew Breitbart of Breitbart.com, Big Hollywood, BigJournalism.com, BigGovernment.com, and lots of other stuff. Breitbart TV.
That's right.
Am I leaving anything else out from your globe-girdling media empire?
I don't know. One day you're just going to have a front page to go to at Breitbart.com. It's been a placeholder. And one day I just want to show up and have people go, oh, that's what he meant to do.
BigEarth.com coming next. Well, what do you think of the conference so far?
Well, I love these people. I love them the second that Anderson Cooper called them teabaggers, and that's when I decided I'm going to be a teabagger because...
Yeah, he says that like it's a bad thing.
Look, I've watched the mainstream media embrace all forms of protest my entire life. I've watched people throw trash cans into Starbucks, and they go up to the marauder and ask the person, excuse me, sir, what is your grievance against society or this amorphous WTO? For these people to attack the Tea Party people simply for asking a series of questions about what are you doing in Washington with my children's future, how can you not like this group of adults? Every single person you meet here, no matter how young or how old, are adults that understand that you just can't put this money on the credit card without having to pay for it one day.
And that really is the central organizing principle. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've heard at this conference say, forget the social issues, forget abortion, forget marijuana, forget anything else. We're going to focus on the money, where the money goes. And maybe that's why the establishment finds it so threatening.
I agree with that completely. But I do think there is a cultural undertone to it. It's not the cultural elements and pushing the cultural elements, but it is the contempt with which the political class and the media class have for people in Middle America, the red states, people who are the salt of the earth in this country. And so there is a cultural element to it. It's people who have said, we're sick of you in New York and Washington, D.C., telling us how to lead our lives.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because one thing I've used as an analogy to this is, you know, America's had a couple of religious great awakenings in its history. This is a political great awakening. I think in the last 50, 60, 70 years, there's been a fairly concerted effort to sort of keep the masses out of politics to the greatest degree possible, keep them pacified and sort of intimidated and shy, and that's breaking down, and ordinary people are getting involved more and more, and that's the big change.
Well, on the flight here, I was on the tarmac for 2 hours, so it was a 6-hour flight, and so I was reading this book called The Intellectuals by Paul Johnson, a British, really bright guy, and I started to realize just how dysfunctional the intellectuals on our planet are, and the politicians are people who take their cues from the intellectuals. And we're starting to realize how much trouble that's wrought us in our society, because the intellectuals want to be liked by the politicians. The politicians want to be liked by the media people. And you find out, when you actually look at a pie chart, or you look at, not a pie chart, but like actually a tree, like a family tree, you realize they're all married to each other.
Yes.
It's so unbelievably incestuous. And these people made decisions on our behalf that suited their life goals, but not the life goals of our people.
I really want to see a big journalism chart showing who's sleeping with who in Washington, and then connecting that to their scholarship and their reporting and their politics. I think it would be quite astounding if you did
How
that.
disgusting is it that I live in Hollywood so that I don't get mucked up by Washington, D.C.?
I think that's right. Well, you've come into for a lot of abuse lately, right? I mean, you know,
I embrace the abuse, because I think that we've taught over the last 10 years the average person that they can be a journalist too. And with blogs, you're a central part of that. Army of Davids is a book that encapsulates the movement of how online journalism has transformed journalism writ large.
Absolutely.
And so my basic take on where we're heading right now is teaching people that they can fight back. It's not just defensive. That's what you and I did for the first 10 years of what we did. We fought back. We acted defensively. We'd read something in the New York Times, and then we'd say, that's not correct. And we acted like an ombudsman, a fact checker, a checks and balance.
Like somebody who ought to work at the Times but doesn't.
But what we're doing now is actually telling these people who have not taken the cues that they need to clean up their acts, that we've got their eyes on them, that if you're not going to take control of the steering wheel and guide this, this vessel, down the road on the straight and narrow, we're going to grab it from you.
Well, that actually brings up a psychological point. I happen to have a psychologist right here. Yeah. So,
hello.
Hey,
Dr. Helen, how are you?
Fine, Andrew, how are you?
Adequate to good.
Good.
So Helen's been talking a lot about this stuff and about what she calls the psychology of fighting back.
Yeah,
and it says how you exemplify that. So we'll talk about this.
So Andrew, as a psychologist, I'm so fascinated about this whole concept you have about fighting back and the psychology of it. How did you get that? Did you have that at an early age, or do you think it's something you developed over time?
I know I've had it my entire life. I have 3 sons, and my oldest son is the best representation of this. I'm not a kind of a hands-on parent. I kind of let my kids do what they want to do, except for one thing. I've said, take on the bullies on the playground.
Good for you.
And I say, punch them in the nose if you have to.
Wow.
I mean, look, argue with them, and I don't care. Violence is the last resort. And I've had parents come up to me and say, thank you very much. Your son stood up for my son that was being bullied.
You're standing up to these bullies, and you see the bullies as sort of the elitist media, is that?
Oh, well, beyond that, but I mean, look, I think that we are a center-right nation. I think that more or less the Tea Party attendees are the early adopters of what I think is a group of people, the Americans, who for the last 20 years were consumerists and thought that the peace dividend that we got after the fall of the Berlin Wall was that we could just go to Crate and Barrel and buy a bunch of crates and barrels and go to Starbucks 3 times a day. And I think that many of us feel guilty that we wasted the last 20 years and that we're squandering our country. So the next 20 years, we're saying let's commit ourselves to reinvigorating the democratic spirit in this country, and that democracy is a participatory sport. And my argument is the reason why this country moved to the left for when it is a center-right country is because the left brilliantly understood that it is a media world, that Hollywood and the mainstream media is much more powerful than the political process.
How can the average person sitting at home right now watching this show, what can they do? Because that's what I get from so many people. I'm sitting home, I'm yelling at the TV, I'm frustrated, and I don't know what to do. There's all these people coming to these tea parties, and maybe they feel like there's something they can do. But what do you say to the average person sitting home wondering?
I'll give it an example. I'm typing away, caught up on whatever, mission that I'm on, and I get a phone call from a friend that I went to high school and college with. His name's Gary Hewson, and he said about 3 weeks into the Martha Coakley, Scott Brown election, he said, I think we can win this thing. And I said, really? I'm not really paying that close attention to it. He says, no, I've been paying attention to it. He's a Californian. And I said, okay, if you want to write about this on one of my sites and you want to research this thing and clue the American people into what's going on, and he did, and he wrote about 13 or 14 pieces that helped to define her, because the Scott Brown campaign was such a positive campaign that said, look, I'm a good guy. And he didn't tell the electorate what a horrible prosecutor she was, and some of the political decisions that she made on prosecutions and ones that she didn't. And it was because of this one person who said, I'm going to get online and I'm going to do it, that I feel that we had a strong influence in that election. He's just an average Joe in Los Angeles. He's in real estate. And so anybody can do it. The very idea that journalism school prepares you for anything other than granting you an elite status. Where did you go to school? Ooh, Columbia Journalism Review. It means less than nothing. These people are the most arrogant bastards you could possibly meet in your entire life. I know them. I go to New York all the time. They want to know me because I'm a traffic guy. I drive traffic to them. And I sit there and I have their cocktails. I have appletinis, delicious. I have Pinot Noir. I'll drink whatever they're drinking. I'm a gregarious guy. Foie gras, bring it on. I go, but at the end of dinner, in which they think that I'm on their side because I ordered what they ordered and I speak in their vernacular and I'm not, highly puritanical. I say, you guys, you don't get it. The American people are now in control of the narrative, and you can't grab it for yourself and drive it off the cliff. That's basically the argument. Anybody can do it.
One of the things Glenn and I were talking about on the way to the Tea Party is that a lot of these people are not that smart. I'm a psychologist. A lot of politicians their IQ is not that high, and they sort of seem like they think that they are such intelligent people that everybody else has a low IQ. Glenn went recently to a Republican Jewish,
Republican Jewish Coalition.
Yeah. That's me.
Yeah.
You. Oh.
Hooray.
Me too.
Baruch atah Adonai.
But it was interesting because everybody there was a surgeon, a doctor, high-level people, and everybody, all
that's
these
the Tea Party mob that they're calling a bunch of
Right.
The first person that came up to me was a doctor running for office as a Tea Party candidate. The first Tea Party that I went to was in Orange County last year on tax day, and a guy came. The guy singing patriotic songs had an accent, and I said, "Where are you from?" "Scotland." I found out he was the lead singer from the Bay City Rollers, and his name's Ian Mitchell. And you should see, he was wearing red, white, and blue. He says, "I love this country. I left a country where I exist in a class system. You're born into a certain place. In this country, there's upward mobility. Anybody can be anything. And if we start to believe in these euphemisms that have been crafted in colleges, redistributive justice, this Lacoffian, George Lakoff, this guy from Berkeley, who's this wordsmith who takes all these cultural Marxist and Marxist constructs that were rejected wholesale by the American people over the last 50 years, have been retweaked to sound as if they're actually pro-capitalism.
Have you ever noticed that the more people talk about equality, the more you wind up with a system where there's one set of rules for the ins and another set of rules for the outs?
Well, I'll tell you this much. I mean, if you can talk about one business model that has failed in the last 50 years, that's the newspaper. And it was one, other than academia, I can think of no other place that adopted the politically correct equality-based hiring practices where everything was based upon multiculturalism. The newsroom is based upon this false assumption that every American wants to exist in their racial category, their sexual orientation category, as opposed to the e pluribus unum model. So this is an e pluribus unum crowd that wants everybody to be a melting pot, and the newsrooms are divided by race, gender, and all that stuff. And so they're fighting all that social crap when the rest of us have gotten on with our lives and learned how to live with one another.
To go back to Helen's psychology resistance point, though, one thing you've really broken is the power of people calling you racist. I mean, every time you do anything, somebody's calling you a racist, and you're just throwing it back in their face. And it seems to me that you've really crossed a threshold with that.
Oh, I have so much fun doing it because I know that the worst thing you can call a person in this country is racist. And so when you go on TV like I do, especially the Bill Maher show, when you know that you're going to be on the defensive, you think to yourself, what's the worst case scenario? What can I expect from these people? Because these people are beneath contempt when they find themselves up against a series of arguments that they can't answer to. And so they'll always come up with an ism. And so I've been on the show before and I acquiesced. I went for the cheap laugh and I left, and a friend called me up and said, "Andrew, you got a couple laughs, but why didn't you stand up for what you believed in?" And so the second time I went on, I stood there on the side and I said, "Just stand up for what you believe in." I went out there and it was like a Mike Tyson fight. Before we could even giggle, we were battling each other because Professor Michael Eric Dyson and Bill Maher wanted to take the talking points du jour from the White House that Rush Limbaugh is a racist and wanted me to have to defend him. And I said, wait a second, hold on. The worst thing you can accuse a person of in this country is racism. And political correctness is like Sharia law. It is like extra constitutional. There isn't settled law on it, but your life is over, your career is over. And I said, how dare you call Rush Limbaugh a racist? Show me your evidence. And all Bill Maher could say was, Barack the Magic Negro. I said, that was a Los Angeles Times reporter by the name of David Ehrenstein that I've debated in print before. I go, he's the one that did that. He described Barack the Magic Negro. He's African American. He was making fun of this author's perception that this guy was a mythical figure. What are you even talking about, Bill Maher? And so these people, when hit with answers, don't know what to say. And what I'll say about the racism charges, I'm trying to teach people that when you are called a racist, keep walking towards it. Don't be afraid. That's what they want you to do. They want you to move away from the argument. Just keep walking straight towards them, because every time they throw that thing out there, that gruel, when they serve it, gets thinner every time they serve it.
Well, I think it's lost its power. I mean, most people don't really care, anymore. When you hear the word racist, you just think, that just means it's somebody.
It's like calling somebody a fascist in the 60s. It's like, okay, that, ho-hum.
Right.
But I do think the ordinary person is afraid. And what would you say to somebody that doesn't have as much power? Like, you're more independent, and we're somewhat, independent. What do you say to somebody, say, sitting in a college class? I know when I was doing my PhD, I mean, people were saying things like this, and there wasn't really that much you could do because you knew you get thrown out, or you knew there'd be repercussions for standing up. What about a person who can't really stand up?
Well, I will say this. Anybody can stand up, and I think that one reason why your husband and I get along so well is that we believe in linking out to other people. We like finding people out there. People call me up all the time. Today I've probably had about 5 phone calls, one from a guy by the name of Chris in St. Louis, and he's a black conservative. He said, whatever happened to the Kenneth Gladney case? That was the black guy that was beaten up, and they called him the N-word, and they've done everything they can to ignore something that runs counter-narrative. And he said...
It was SEIU guys that beat him up.
Yeah, it was
right.
SEIU, which it all ties into this unified field theory thing that we're a part of. And this guy said, I want to help. I've got a group of about 800 people that are black conservatives around the country, and we can get about 60 to 80.
I thought those didn't exist.
Yeah, well, look, they're all over here. And the thing is, that's why they go so hard after Clarence Thomas or anyone that would dare step out of line, because they want to send the message to anyone that feels that way at home, that if you step out of line, the media will attack you, the NAACP won't come to your defense, and that's the methodology of a collective gang of bullies. And the thing is, we need to start punching back.
Now, what was it some politicians said? Get in their face, punch back twice as hard?
Yeah,
that
like was Barack
Yeah.
Obama. The day, coincidentally, that SEIU thugs went down and beat the crap out of Kenneth Gladney, and the mainstream media refuses to cover it, and we had to force the St. Louis prosecution to finally file charges, but there were ordinance charges, which is less than a slap of the wrist. So we have a lot of work to do.
Well, I have to say things are going well with it. And one thing, sort of as a final question that interests me is there's a lot of foreign interest in this Tea Party movement. There's a lot of foreign press here. We talk about Americans doing it, but really all over the place. If you look at polls of public attitudes in Europe, for example, versus what governments in Europe are doing, there's a big disjunct there too. And I wonder, you think you're going to see similar resistance to political class elsewhere?
I think it's very exciting to see Lech Walesa, the former president of Poland, coming to Illinois to endorse and do a stump speech for a candidate in Illinois who's part of the Tea Party movement. He sees what's going on, and we interviewed him at one of my sites at Big Government and asked him, do you have like a message to the American people why you're here? And he says, our freedom is your freedom. And it's a fundamental recognition that America was the last place that people would go for freedom, and the fear that there could never be another Poland if America loses that which makes it special. Because if we are no longer the beacon of freedom in the world, then who will be? And Lech Walesa is one of those Malcolm Gladwellian early adopters saying, let's fight this fight now. And I'm creating a site called Big EU, which I want to help spread the word to the American people that it's not just you, red state people, who believe in freedom and liberty. There are about a dozen think tanks throughout Europe that are pro-free market, pro-individual liberty, and they are drowned out by a media that is even more uniformly left of center and oppressive in defining the narrative. And I want to teach these people, let's start the fight in Europe, because if we can break this information stranglehold, then the majority can start, changing things.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us, and I look forward to watching it go on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys later.